I think the first thing that came to my mind, and I will tell you from again, one of the great vantage points we have is we get to see so many different brands that we deal with, and we're very, very focused in the health and wellness area. So there's a lot of overlap, but I will tell you this is the area that I see a lot of companies struggle with. And the reason is to manage inventory really, really well, and your entire supply chain for that matter, it's very difficult to do it well, right? You can do it haphazardly. You can go run around and find product and buy things sporadically and chase down inventory every 8 weeks when you run out. But are you dedicated to being great at this, right? Is this something that you can commit to? Because to build a really good quality supply chain management team in any sort of respectable revenue of 10 million plus, it's going to cost you maybe $1 million to get a good quality team. And I mean a team that knows what they're doing to manage supply chain. It is not easy to do. So I think the first part of inventory management is just trying to determine, first and foremost, do you actually want to be good at it, right? I mean, is it a core competency that you think you can be the best in the world at, or are you the best in the world at marketing, right? Or are you the best in the world at product formulation, or best in the world at building, converting pages, higher than anyone else? It's really making that determination first and foremost to say, do I want to be good at this? Because supply chain management is painful. One of the expressions we used to always have in supply chain management is every time you place an order for any new product or any product already existing in your product suite, there are 1,000 things that can go wrong between the time you place that order and the time you receive it, and one or several of them will go wrong, and you have no idea which ones are going to go wrong, right? Because supply chain management is extremely inefficient and clunky in nature in of itself, especially with nutritional supplements. There are so many things that can go wrong. Raw materials get held up at customs. What do you do? Your cap didn't come in, and it came in ribbed instead of smooth. But your brand says you have to have a smooth cap. What do you do? So you have to build a team that understands how to be flexible enough to understand and accommodate for those nuances that can happen in supply chain management. In 25 years of building different brands, inventory, I used to always look at pallets in our warehouse as cash. Instead of products on a pallet, I used to think of it as cash on a pallet, right? How do I turn that back? How do I get that cash back out of that pallet as fast as I can, right? And that's always the balance of inventory management. And I will say though, I've seen more times than not, and even in my own instances, where the inability to manage inventory well can be the one thing that can turn your company upside down the quickest, like really fast. When your balance sheet has a large amount of inventory that becomes slow moving, obsolete. You got really aggressive with marketing, saying, "Man, we're going to sell a bunch of this." So you ordered a lot, and then the page doesn't convert quite as well, or you have a delay in getting the launch, and you're just sitting on that inventory, right? And we all know that when you're scaling and you're growing, growth eats cash for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and dessert. And you wake up one day and you're staring at your balance sheet and it just has a pile of money sitting on that inventory line, right? And you think, what the hell do I do? Right? It's detrimental to your success. And so when you think about inventory management, you have to think about it in terms of a continuous fluid supply chain that starts from your data, going back to pulling data and knowing what to look for, is one of the vantage points we have, and when we oftentimes can forecast for our clients better than our clients can forecast for themselves. We joke about it, but in all seriousness, it's because we have the data. and we know how to use it, right? We look at the data and we look at trailing 1, 2, 4, 8 weeks, and we say, what is this SKU doing? What velocity is it moving, right? And from there, we look at, what you would look at is just from a marketing perspective, what am I going to do any differently over the next 4 to 8 weeks? Right? Am I going to bring on some more new affiliates? Am I going to bring on a new channel? Am I going to launch a new page? Are my conversions starting to get a little better? So you've got to be able to look at that velocity of that trailing data, and then connect that to what do you think is going to happen in the future. And that's always just a crystal ball, but you have to do your best to try to connect those two to give you some sort of a projection, right? And then from there, you're basically linking in if you're working with a supplier, there's always a lead time, right? And we always underestimate demand during lead time. We always underestimate the time it takes to get a product, right? So that's where I've seen a lot of companies get hung up in terms of, well, my supplier said it's 4 weeks to get the product. Well, but how often does that actually happen? Go back and look at the data, review it. Go back and, one, you gotta hold your suppliers accountable, but two, just test it against what's really happening, right? So it might take them 5 weeks or 6 weeks to get the product together. And then you've got transit time, right? And then you've got time to get it to ensure that, you're doing all the FDA and GMP compliance. Are you doing retains? Are you looking at the micro and metal testing? Are you quarantining it while you're getting third-party testing before you release it? And then you got to get it received, and then you got to get it ready to ship, and it might need to be kitted, it might need to be put into a box, retail box or something before you ship it. Building a reasonable demand during lead time that is actually achievable and gives you, some buffer is critical. And that is one area that I see underestimated all the time. Right? And then you've got to build in a safety stock measure. Right? I mean, a lot of this is kind of 101 inventory management, but I see some of these things overlooked so often, right? It's just sell and order and sell and order and sell and order, and that is a horrible way to manage inventory, right? So you got to look at safety stock. You got to say, how often, as a percentage of my days of sales, do I want to risk being out of stock? If it's 0, well, then you're going to hold a lot more inventory. If it's 10%, you can live with that. You can manage those calls and the potential refunds or chargebacks. You have to be able to say, what am I willing to tolerate, and build in that safety stock, right? Percentage. Supply chain management is messy and clunky and ugly by nature. And I've been there as a CEO of a brand. It's the one area you just kind of go, just figure it out. Just make sure I have inventory to sell, right? But the reality is you got to get in there and you got to look at it and you got to be involved and you got to make sure that there's a cadence to how you're looking at that data. Whether it's daily, whether it's weekly, that there has to be a discipline to looking at that data because, as you know, that data can move very quickly, right? You bring on a new affiliate and all of a sudden they're on a rush and they're scaling and it's how do you respond, right? How do you respond? You have to get in front of that as quickly as possible. And the only way you do it is through the data and through trying to understand what is going to happen in the future, knowing that you're going to be wrong to some degree. The question is, by how much? You have to get in front of that as quickly as possible. And the only way you do it is through the data and through trying to understand what is going to happen in the future, knowing that you're going to be wrong to some degree. The question is, by how much? Right? So a lot of it is, I'd say 90% science and 10% art of really trying to understand the data. And not just looking at the spreadsheet and saying, let that make the decision for you, right? But stepping back and saying, okay, what's causing this data? What's happening here?